We want to welcome everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to this forum called the Rural Broadband Experience. This is the first of 4 online public forums that are taking place here as part of the Central Iowa Broadband Internet Study. Here in Central Iowa, we know that some folks have excellent broadband connectivity, and we know that others are struggling to connect. And in this forum, we're really going to focus on why there are challenges in particular rural areas of Northwest or of Central Iowa, and why my phone always rings during meetings. We'll also be talking about what can possibly be done to improve the rural broadband experience here in Central Iowa. My name is Curtis Dean, and I'm one of the consultants that is working as part of a team to gather data about broadband in this 11 county region of Central Iowa. Joining me as our co-moderator today is Todd Kielkoff. Todd is also a member of the consulting team, and Todd and I both call Central Iowa home, and we're really excited to be part of this project. We would love to hear your comments, our attendees, as you are going along. You feel free to chime in. You can do so a couple of different ways. You can click the Q&A button and you can type in a question, which we will be monitoring and share with people. If you have something to add that you'd like to raise your hand, click the raise hand button and we'll be able to call upon you. And there's also a chat window there, so you can type something in the chat window. We'll be monitoring all those. So if you do have any questions or comments or sharing your experiences throughout the process, you'll be able to do so in multiple ways. We have a great panel that we brought together to share various perspectives on the rural broadband experience. You can see here on screen some of those panelists. Bill Minner is the Executive Director of the Iowa Rural Development Council. James Bauer is president of Bauer Farms. He is a farm operator in rural Madison County. Also joining us from Madison County is Tom Lenners. He's the executive director of the Madison County Development Group. Brittany Morales is on the panel, and she is here from the Iowa Area Development Group's Ripple Effect program. Brittany, thanks for coming on. A little bit later on, we'll play back some interviews that were recorded earlier with people that are part of the rural broadband experience here in Central Iowa. Brett Kelso is a Warren County resident, and also Tar Masias is with Ola, Iowa, and he'll be talking a little bit about how rural broadband is affecting and impacting the Latino community here in the area. So as we get underway here, I want to turn to Todd first and talk a little bit about what some of the goals of the study are. Todd, tell us a little bit about what everyone is hoping to accomplish through this Central Iowa broadband internet study.
Sure. The study really has 3 main phases. We're doing data collection, so we're actually getting real experiences from people and trying to get a comprehensive view about what the economic impacts of those experiences are. We have another consulting team partner, Baton Global, that is taking a look at the macroeconomic effects of not having broadband. So we say, do we have it? And then we say, what happens if we don't have it the way we need to in Central Iowa? And then the third phase is to try to empower providers to understand where there's market gaps. And it's then maybe be able to provide a financing mechanism if capital is a problem to make those connections, or is it adoption? There's various reasons that we might not have the connectivity that we want. You just have to really take a look on how to empower providers to come to the table where there's gaps.
Great. Well, those gaps can include a number of things, right? We can look at those gaps in terms of availability. Is there broadband internet available at a particular address or location? Could be affordability gaps. In other words, can you afford a broadband service that is offered in your area? Reliability can be a gap for some folks, right? Is the broadband service reliable enough to allow you to do the work that you need to do? And finally, speed. Is your broadband internet service fast enough for your home or business to use to do what you want to do with it? So those are some of the gaps that we'll identify, hopefully, as part of this study. I also want to tell you that one of the most important ways that we're gathering this data we're talking about here in the first phase is through the Central Iowa Broadband Internet Survey. And so there is a web page. Just go to Central Iowa Broadband survey.com, and you will come up to this page. It's actually on the Des Moines Partnership website. Des Moines Partnership is serving as a coordinating body for the 11 counties and the individual cities and other entities in those counties that are participating in the program. But we would really encourage anyone who is watching this or listening to this to take that survey. Take it at your residential location if you are a residential internet customer. And if you are a business internet customer, we encourage you to also take this business survey from your business location. Use your landline internet, not your cell phone internet, because we really want to measure, as part of this, speeds of actual broadband experiences in central Iowa. In addition, on this page, you'll also see our setup of public forums, including the one we're on today, right here. But we have a meeting later this afternoon on the challenges of learning from home. And we've got also telehealth on Monday the 10th and remote work challenges on Tuesday the 11th. So really encourage everybody, take the survey if you haven't already. If you have taken the survey, help us out by spreading the word to friends and family members so that they too know to take the survey and help us out as we try to gather this data. So I want to turn to Bill Minner to kind of get the panelist discussion started. First of all, Bill, I think it'd be good for everybody to understand what the Iowa Rural Development Council is and what role it plays.
Sure. And then I'm going to tell you about the other hats that I'm wearing today, too.
Oh, many hats, yes.
The Rural Development Council is a public-private partnership, a nonprofit statewide organization that focuses on rural vitality. We have federal government, state government, education, utilities, economic development groups, nonprofits, foundations, anybody who's got their toe in rural Iowa, we hope is part of our network. And we have over 300 individuals and organizations that participate in our work. We're probably best known for hosting the annual Iowa Rural Summit, which is coming up this August. And frankly, rural broadband has been one of our anchor issues for a long time. Wearing a different hat, I'm the executive director of the Iowa Rural Health Association. And you're going to be talking about that in an upcoming session. And I'll tell you, the pandemic has certainly underscored the importance of access to broadband in order to access telemedicine opportunities. I live in Grinnell, so I'm part of this 11 county region. And I serve on the Grinnell Area Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors. So I'm out promoting to our members and members of our community the survey, trying to get them to sign up and share their insights. We know that the digital divide is not necessarily urban versus rural. There are folks in big cities that don't have reliable speeds. But we do know that in rural communities that the cost of doing business, the cost of extending the infrastructure down gravel roads is a challenge. I used to run the rural development program for USDA in Iowa, and it was USDA that was the driver many years ago of rural electrification. We face the same challenges today because of the cost of extending that infrastructure. And at the end of the day, regions and counties and communities are finding that they may have to take their own strategic steps in order to build out that infrastructure.
Are you getting feedback from the people that you encounter in your whichever hat you're wearing about what their experiences are and how those experiences are impacting their daily quality of life, quality of income, things like that?
I must have that sort of a friendly face because people do call or grab me and often vent. And again, going back to the pandemic, it has emphasized and underscored everything we do because of remote work, because of remote learning, because of telemedicine, because of the fact that we're spending more time streaming. If you don't have the speeds necessary to do the things you want to do, especially when you've been spending the last 15 months holed up in your house more or less, the shortages, the shortcomings have really kind of come to the forefront. And, you know, lots of people have access, The question is, do they have the access to do what they want to do? And that's the new divide today.
Mhm. Definitely. Well, speaking of working and running a business in rural central Iowa, I want to turn to you, James. You're a farm operator, and we all know that agriculture is the backbone of Iowa's economy. Now, you own and operate farm operation in Madison County and a member of the Farm Bureau. Talk through us a little bit about what broadband means for your farm operation.
Anymore it's key. 10 years ago, I moved back to the farm here 18 years ago, and we started with dial-up access back then. And so we've been through the gamut of dial-up access, 3 or 4 different satellite providers. And we're recently, just very recently, within the last year or two, we've been able to connect to CenturyLink. They ran fiber optic in this part of the county. We're not able to take full advantage of it because the fiber didn't come down our road, or we're still, I think, a half a mile or 3/4 of a mile away from the fiber. But we're able to get to, which we think is space age speeds of, I think, 40 megabyte, which for people in Des Moines or urban areas, when you see Mediacom talking about gig or 10 gig speeds, we're still in the Model T stage out here. But it feels significantly better. That's just a little background. It's key for us, whether it's keeping track of, for us, market moves, weather, ordering. A lot of our suppliers now, we can, it's all, whether it be Amazon or our local John Deere dealer, we can look at their inventory at 11 o'clock at night and go, yep, they got the part here, or wait, we got to drive 2 hours first thing in the morning to get the part. So it's critical for our business, just like it is just about any other business in today's world.
Now, we've heard so much, James, about intelligence, more intelligence and technology getting into the average farming operation. Things like, obviously, tractors that steer themselves, and data collection at the, micro level in fields. Are you taking advantage of some of that? And how does that interface with broadband connectivity for you?
Yeah, I mean, we have, we're taking this as full advantage as we can. A lot of that is on the equipment side, the actual equipment side. A lot of that is GPS based, cell based communication. So, but if you're here in the office, I can pull up on my computer screen, and for the equipment that we have that are connected, I can see where a piece of equipment is, how's the operator operating it, what are they doing. But we've got to have, good access to do that, to make that information useful. So, a lot of our equipment will send data up to the cloud every 5 seconds. We're transmitting data from a tractor or a combine up to the cloud, and it's accessible then to us within, a few minutes of processing time to get it where it needs to go. But if we don't have the reliability in the office or in our shop to do that, or the access, then the value of that information becomes a lot less useful to us.
Well, Todd, now you're an old farm boy, so you probably have more questions about this than city boy me. But I know we've talked in the past about even your family operation down in Southeast Iowa, and how technology's changed it. I assume that the sorts of things that James is talking about using it for on a daily basis is, pretty familiar with most farmers in the region.
Yeah, and having that home base operation, being able, I think that's the thing people miss, is the key is where you said when it's useful to have the data. In other words, when a change can be made in an instant in order to impact yield on down the line. People just don't understand the chain reactions, and having late data really doesn't work.
Yeah. James, is there anything? Go ahead.
I was going to say, a good example of that is in the fall when we're combining. As soon as we get done with a field, the crop consultants and agronomists that we work with can access that data and start to make analysis of what we need to do from a fertility plan for the next year's crop. So, it can be transmitted seamlessly, and within 24 hours, we can have a prescription written for a specific field in terms of fertility, soil sampling, grid sampling, whatever it may be, and can have somebody out in the field the next day utilizing that information. But if we don't have good broadband, reliable broadband, and like I said, we think 40 megabyte speed is fabulous compared to what we've dealt with for the last 10 or 15 years. But in another year or two, it'll probably feel like dial-up speed to us because of the way things change so fast and so much.
Absolutely. The latest statistics show that internet usage nationwide in 2020 increased 40% alone in 1 year. And although everybody thinks that might be because of COVID, it's not that much different than the amount of data being consumed year over year previous to that. And COVID may have created new habits that we decide to keep. Even though we will be able to be in person more, we still may be doing more things virtually than we used to. So I want to turn now to Brittany. Hi, Brittany. Welcome to coming on. Appreciate it. Brittany, tell us about the Iowa Area Development Group and the Ripple Effect program.
Absolutely. Thanks, Curtis. So the Iowa Area Development Group was really created to provide economic development services on behalf of the rural utilities across Iowa. And so that will include your rural electric cooperatives, the municipalities who buy service through those rural electric cooperatives, and then also the independent telecommunications companies across Iowa. Those are going to be your local community-based providers. So we really come at it from an economic development standpoint and helping them serve their communities with economic development services on their behalf. And the Ripple Effect program in specific serves just those community-based telecommunications providers.
We are really, I believe the state of Iowa has more independently owned telecommunications companies than any other state in the USA. It's just the way we grew. We grew with homegrown providers, both on the energy side and on the telecommunications side. So as you look at that from that economic development standpoint, you're talking about the interface between the economy and broadband. What are you seeing as far as the impacts of broadband or the lack of broadband on those broader economic development efforts?
Yeah, so I guess I'm really fortunate in the standpoint of the providers that I'm providing service on behalf are providing really great service a lot of times to their communities and also the areas around. But as Bill mentioned, and you also mentioned, Curtis, the pandemic, it has amplified and brought all of this to the forefront. But this is something that our communities, especially rural communities, have been dealing with, pre-pandemic, and just the way that the economies have moved so quickly and trying to access the internet through those channels. So you have people who are underserved, and in those communities where there's that lack of access or the amount of access they need, people are screaming for service. I mean, begging providers, calling providers and begging them, please, please, please come to my area. And, the state's rolling out initiatives, and there's initiatives such as this happening to try and make that happen. Pandemic has highlighted it, but it's pre-pandemic. With everything we're doing is you have to have broadband. It's like a utility. It's just as crucial as water and electricity. We moved recently. I set up, obviously I'm working from home. You can see my home, in the background. But my first call was, I want to make sure that I have, broadband in my home, the day that I move. And then I called for electricity and water and the other things. So it's just as important and so needed.
Absolutely. You bring up a wonderful point there, Brittany. I just like to throw out to all the panel here. Have you observed or heard stories about people who are choosing where they live according to what the broadband connectivity is in those areas? I know I'm one of those people that when I relocated to where I relocated, I came where I am exactly because I knew that there was a very high quality broadband connection here. So I'm wondering if any of you are hearing stories like that as well.
Increasingly, Curtis, but after the fact. It's kind of like, well, I got here, but one of the reasons I chose this location because they had fiber to the home or fiber to the business. And it's all about, I'm also hearing, as you are too, from folks who are choosing to build in communities. And after they make that decision, they realize what they don't have. And then they have to work backwards to try to figure out how to get themselves the high-speed connectivity that they need in this new house that they might be building in an area that's completely underserved or in some cases unserved. So
yes,
one of those, it's really about awareness. And you think about, do you have water? Do you have sewer? Do you have electricity? And at the same time, they're asking that question, how big is my pipe, so to speak, as far as the broadband connection?
There was some recent publicity about a group of properties near Bondurant, which is certainly not something you would consider to be extremely rural because it's so close to the urban areas of the Des Moines metro. But there were a development there that the folks were not able to get broadband. They didn't know that, or they were told they would get it when they built, but then they discovered after they built that it just wasn't as available as they thought it was going to be. So certainly that is a challenge.
I guess I'm also curious if you're hearing stories that the definition of serve, particularly in the business community, is to have a redundant connection because of the importance. I think that's something that the public isn't quite aware of, let alone policymakers, about redundancy. Anybody can chime in on that, about any real experiences.
Yeah, I think that, James, did you have something to add?
Well, I was going to say, just from a business standpoint for us, redundancy, our backup is having to use, a cell phone or an iPad or something as a hotspot to do what we need to do. And, that's a great backup plan, although it can be pretty expensive if you have to do it for any duration of time. And one of the challenges with the reliability of the internet out here is, if you're the only place, whether it be a resident or a business like ours, on a gravel road, and there might only be one other person, you fall, at the end of the day, they're going to repair or take care of, however many customers they can, that the biggest bang for the buck. So if you're a one business place on one road and the issue is with you, it could be days or weeks before you get service back. And so all of a sudden your emergency plan of using a hotspot, doing calls like this or anything, eats up a lot of data. And at some point, the cell phone companies go, we're going to start charging you for that. Yeah. So yeah, it's easy to have a redundancy plan, but the reliability is key, really key.
And you're mentioning redundancy, and indeed a lot of people use a cellular signal as their primary internet connection because there may not be another choice. But cellular coverage is not always 100% reliable either. And there are areas where there are gaps in at least the higher bandwidth or 4G cellular. So that's not always ideal for many people.
We've got gaps out here where you can't get a signal. And I mean, I can go 100 yards from my shop and there's spots where you can't even get a cell signal, let alone, try and figure out, we're actually looking at trying to tap into our network as we expand and putting a repeater or some sort of way to broadcast put a repeater on one of our grain bins or something to widen our network, our own network, so we don't run into the issues like that.
Well, we earlier had talked with, had a chance to interview a rural Iowa resident who is experienced some of these the same things in gaps in coverage, and therefore maybe not the quite broadband experience they would like. So I'm going to play back an interview that I conducted a while back with Brent Kelso. Brent is a rural Warren County resident, and he shared his family's perspectives on broadband in his area.
kind of central Warren County about 11 years ago, and coming from the city, we weren't used to what we'd run into, and so we had no service whatsoever out. And so we had to kind of start looking for, or no broadband, I should say, or no fiber, whatever. We had to start looking for other ways to get service. And somebody brought to our attention a point-to-point system, where it's like water tower to our antenna, and then you're faced with issues like trees. And so our immediate neighbors across the street go one direction, and we go the other direction to a different water tower. And it was not too bad a service. I think a lot of it's just you want to always continue to look for other options and so forth. We have other neighbors that have tried different things. And also the way the system works out here is it seems like some people have access to different things than others do.
Right.
And so some of them have fiber running right by their house, or some other digital system running by the house, where we have never had that. And so basically, we tried to go to a hotspot scenario through our cell service. We had a special hotspot, not just the one on your phone, but a special little hotspot that allowed us to do some things. But then, of course, you have data limits.
Right.
We ran into that, and then we have teenage kids now, which you can imagine have their own needs, and so they use a lot more data than we do. My wife and I both do work from home, so we need it, but it doesn't seem like it has to be, maybe as good as we thought it did. But anyway, so once we ran into the data limitations of the hotspot, we decided to revert back to point to point. And over time, they've increased their speeds. We got a new antenna in our house. They, like I said, they've changed things, from time to time, improved it. So we may be at low on the end of better speed, and it works for us. Kids don't seem to complain, which is always a solid. But anyway, so no, other than that, it's taken us a long time. Like I said, 11 years to get here. If our system is down, some kind of rainstorm or something, it doesn't typically down very long. It only be down, maybe a day, maybe not even. Occasionally we'll have a bigger issue and it might be down for a couple of days, but we've been pretty fortunate that way.
Okay.
But we're always looking. Lately, it seems like we've got fiber probably within a half mile of us in about every direction. And I'm out here in an area of acreages, and there's a lot of homes out here actually. You might be surprised, but there's some pretty high-end homes out here. But it's I'd say there's probably 40 homes anyway within a mile of me, and none of us have good internet. We're all just trying to deal with different options. So that's kind of where it's taking us, and hopefully, since we're within a half mile, the day may be coming. But
well,
I hope I'm still living here with it.
Right. That one of the goals of the Central Iowa Broadband Internet Study is to identify areas that are underserved, and then hopefully help attract providers that would want to serve those folks. So who knows? This may have a good outcome for you. Now, you mentioned you and your wife both work from home. Have you been doing that for a number of years?
Yes, pretty much the whole time. I'm not here all the time. My wife works exclusively from home, so she's and she actually has to go through, through interfaces for her work, firewalls and all that. So she's got a little more, probably entails more with her, and she needs it a little more than I do.
Sure.
Mine is more basic work, but yeah, so we're here all the time pretty much. And like I said, the kids, when they come home, and the evenings and everything, when people jump on those times, you have a little bit of an influx, but we've been fortunate. Hasn't been too much of a drag.
So it hasn't had a seriously negative effect on your ability to work from home to this point?
Not usually. Like I said, we're never down more than a couple of days. We used to have issues where I had to go in town. So I have to go in town to some location to use, especially my wife. And that was a bigger issue, but now we seem to have it under control.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're in a similar position, obviously with your neighbors. You mentioned the folks that live in your area. Some have better service than others just because of the location, but it sounds like you're in a similar situation to a lot of other people in central Iowa.
Yes, I assume so. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's a battle for sure, and I'm kind of surprised we're not that far from Des Moines, so I would kind of think we would, this wouldn't be as difficult of a situation.
Great. Well, hey, Brent, I want to thank you for sharing your experiences with us. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Curtis. Have a great day.
You too. One of the things that I would note about the interview with Brent, he seems to be more forgiving of multi-day outages than the average person might be. As he said, it's never down for more than a day or maybe two. And I think that I don't know about you, but I think that a lot of people that would be a business killer or at least a source of much stress in the household if that happened. We want to turn our attention next to Tom Lenners. Tom's been waiting patiently for his turn at the table here. Thanks for coming on, Tom. You're the economic or the executive director of the Madison County Development Group. Wanted to get your perspective on how broadband in rural areas affects the ability for you and people like you in your position to bring economic development to those rural areas. Talk a little bit about your experience in Madison County.
Well, thank you. And hi, James. Thanks for hopping on too. We're kind of doubled up here in Madison County. A couple points come to mind here. I was just out at a small business in South Central Madison County, and very meager connectivity. And they've got a custom pork operation where they sell high-end pork products to whoever wants to purchase them, and they ship them and everything. And one of the owners was telling me they go online to pull down their orders at 8 or 9 o'clock. There's some witching hour where their connection speeds pick up, I suppose, when the kids go to bed at other places. So that's been part of it. Just the ability to access that's in a micro business. On some of the bigger businesses, the bank across the street here really struggled for a couple of years with their daily transmittal reports to the clearinghouses, and they finally got together with a reseller to pull fiber up into their building. One of the things that's frustrating in rural Iowa is that there is fiber pulled a lot of places. Cell phone towers, for example, there's a lot of fiber, but is it accessible, and does somebody want to partner? Well, that's been a bit of a challenge. Now, if you're a financial institution and have some budget, you can probably pay that $15,000-$20,000. I forget what he told me it was, but it's not inexpensive to come into that. So I think we need to broaden that availability a little bit here. Happy story is at least they could afford it and they got it. Now, a lot of other businesses in town, particularly during the pandemic, have had to kind of turn on their channels through marketing. They market through their email lists and then have YouTube events or Facebook event lives, and that's been very good. But then the connectivity has been a little bit of a challenge even in downtown Winterset. Mm-hmm. We've got neighborhoods here in town, and we have Mediacom and we have CenturyLink, and there are neighborhoods here where CenturyLink says, well, we got your dial tone, you're out of luck. That's all we're going to do, or that's all we've got room for right now. Mediacom will go up into some of those spots for whatever reason. We struggle with, if you will, the name brands, the big brands here. So we're really excited about this broadband study to get a little bit more play from some of our telcos, some of Brittany's colleagues that we know are running fiber to cell phone towers here closely. So the larger clients that we occasionally have visits from, the $15,000 or $20,000 to pull fiber under a road, or the last 150 feet or quarter mile, like James was talking about, a lot of those folks, if it's here, okay. And can we get to a second source? Yeah, it'll be a little bit more. I mean, they can work that into their budget when they're analyzing a site. Sometimes that's cost us a prospect. As connectivity gets bigger and better, I think it's going to be more of a half to half. We're exploring the idea of a certified site. Fiber to the site is a part of that process. And I think we'll be able to check that box. But I think some of the other parts, the small business, the existing business that we have is probably, Debbie Durham says that existing is what gives you 80% of your growth.
Right.
But we need to fix up the people that are here too, to help them grow and expand. One last real quick thought, Curtis. Winterset pre-pandemic was sending 13, 15, 1,600 cars north and east out of central Madison County commuting into Des Moines. A lot of those jobs have changed to full telecommuting or partial telecommuting, and that's really put a strain on our infrastructure out here too. I've got a friend, and she's on one of my boards here, that she gets up in the morning and checks her connection to figure out where she's going to work that day. Can you imagine having to log in and make sure you've got signal before you can decide? It's a big company, we'd all recognize it, but she has the ability to work from home, but she's got to have signal to get that worked out. So anyway, we're evolving down here, and we're excited about the study, and I probably filibustered long enough here.
Hey, Curtis, could I ask Tom a quick question?
Absolutely.
And Tom, it's great to see you.
Hi, Bill.
When you think about those, like your certified site process really interests me, because you and the city and the county and whomever is going to work to get fiber to the site. The workforce, though, for that company, the people that live in town, are still going to struggle. So it becomes a workforce issue. Can you get them to live in the community if you have maybe substandard connectivity, but we've got your site set? So, it's great there, but it's not great here. So you're in a bit of a conundrum there.
We really are. And the dead spots in town are the thing that drives me nuts. I mean, we, at a recent city council meeting, a couple of years ago, we had a relatively big crowd there, and we thought it was because of, issue A on the agenda that night. Turns out it was on a very minor part of the agenda about a visit with a telecom company, and the neighborhood that is basically unserved showed up in force to let us know that, well, we need some help. We want some help. Let's get some signal out here. So it's a big deal. And we, with the school having to pivot so quickly here too, and I know there's events about that, but having to pivot the school was a real challenge here. And they were working on plans of driving buses out to develop hotspots out in the country, if you can believe that. So
Wow.
They really had to MacGyver it to get the connectivity put together. So happy we're returning to more normal times right now.
The new normal anyway, right?
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate that input, Tom. That's really good, and it really kind of frames up how although We're talking about rural broadband here. The definition of rural is kind of partially whatever you see when you look in the mirror. And some people may think of the inside the town of Winterset as not rural, it's town. But in other ways, you are still very rural. So it really kind of points out that definitions are fuzzy in many cases.
Well, we had the FCC commissioner in town here, Congressperson Axney had FCC commissioner out here a year and a half ago, and then they were just discovering that their connectivity in a census tract was one lit house. Well, you
Mhm.
know, and Bill's well aware of that. I mean, it was ridiculous, and I think they've discovered that that's not the case, but we need to keep pressure on everybody to listen from that standpoint. It sounds like that message is starting to get through too.
Absolutely. Well, we, as we're talking about broadband access in central Iowa and particularly rural areas, one of the things I wanted to turn our attention to a little bit on this discussion is how that access is affecting the various communities within central Iowa. One of those is the diverse community that we have in the region, the Latino community. So earlier, I had a chance to visit with Tar Macias. He's with Hola America. And we talked about the importance of broadband to the Latino community here in central Iowa. So we'll share that interview next. Well, nope. There we go. We'll go there. I knew at least once I would share the wrong thing. So we'll try that again. Here we go. We're talking about broadband in rural parts of central Iowa. And one of our guests here today is Tar Macias, and Tar is with olaiowa.com. Tar, I really want to thank you for coming on and talking about broadband in rural areas. Tell everybody about yourself.
And thank you for inviting me. Well, I'm Tar Macias. I'm the president of Hola Iowa. And Hola Iowa is a multimedia company that we reach the Latino communities throughout the whole state of Iowa. And we do everything in English and Spanish. But also a big part of our company is that we're a consulting company to help organizations better reach the Latino communities throughout Iowa, not only on the cities, but also in rural Iowa.
Absolutely. That's great. And you guys have been a big help during the Central Iowa Broadband Study and Survey in helping to reach out to the Latino community. Again, Tar, our topic and our subject of today's discussion is rural broadband. You're pretty plugged into that community here in Central Iowa. What are the issues and challenges that our Latino community in Central Iowa is facing in regards to broadband?
Well, I believe the pandemic has really brought out to light the disparities that we have in access to broadband. Mm-hmm. And I think even before the pandemic started, there was a big gap, but a lot of people just didn't know about it. And the Pew Research Center found out in a survey that 50% of the Hispanic adults, only 57% of us own a computer or laptop at home. And that's compared to 82% of the white adults. So that's a big gap of about 25%. And then out of those Latino survey, 25% of them only have access to their phone, to the internet. So the gap is even bigger right there. So now imagine, that that pandemic hits and you have, now your kids have to be going to school through the laptop or through the computer virtually. And that you don't have computers at home, or you don't have internet access. And now imagine that both parents are essential workers, so they get no time off. And that happened a lot to the communities like Marshalltown, where maybe the parents were working at the food processing plant and they have to work the shifts. They didn't get any they couldn't work virtually like many of us could. So the kids are alone at home. So a lot of times it's up to the older siblings to feed them, to make sure they tune in for school. And now imagine you don't have access to the internet. I heard many stories of kids and families just driving to the parking lot of a library or a McDonald's just to access the Wi-Fi in order to do their homework or in order to attend school. And that's something that a lot of us take for granted. When this happened, it was pretty easy for my family to adapt to say, okay, I got a laptop, my daughter has a laptop, my wife has a laptop, we get broadband access, and even we have our smartphones with internet unlimited data, so it has a backup.
Mhm.
So with that in mind, I think a lot of us take it for granted. We don't realize that there's a big group of people that don't have those privileges that we have. And I think with the pandemic hitting the Latino community at a higher level than the mainstream community, it just made all of these inequities more clear to all of us.
Absolutely. I think of the folks that, in particular in rural areas, there could be a number of reasons why they are not utilizing internet, broadband internet at their home. Um, is this some of the same reasons you're seeing in the Latino community? Things like there is no internet available, or there is internet available, but it's slow, or there's internet available, it's good, but it's too expensive. Are those all some of the same factors that we see in your community, in the Latino community?
Some of them are the same factors,
Yeah.
and I think there's even more barriers to that. Maybe a lot of them don't have, like we mentioned, laptops. A
Right.
lot of them maybe just depend on their data from their phone in order to connect, in order to serve the internet. So and I think cost is a big factor, especially when if somebody I think my internet access bill is around $90 per month. So for people who are in a budget, or maybe they're getting hit because of pandemic,
Right.
they you have to make cuts, and a lot of times the internet is one of the first things to go. Yeah.
Yeah, that's very true. The COVID crisis really has caused a lot of people to make a lot of difficult choices, and financially, that may be one of the choices they've had to make. Unfortunately, that is continuing to impact them. Uh, do you think that what are some of the things that you think that providers, community leaders, et cetera, should be thinking of when it comes to improving broadband access to our rural Latino population here in Central Iowa?
Well, I think a big factor is to make sure that you get the message out to the audience, to the people that you want to get it out to. And a lot of times a big barrier is the language.
Yes.
That's why what we do in my job, we do everything in English or Spanish, because we want to be as inclusive as we can to everybody. Not just to the Latinos that only speak Spanish, but also to the Latinos that might not speak Spanish. So we put everything in both languages. And I think a lot of times with this pandemic, our leaders waited too long to get the information available to the Latino audience, and a lot of times too little, too late, and that's why me and my team, a lot of our writers took it upon ourselves to translate a lot of the materials that were around, to make sure that we put them on our website and social media for our audience to see. But still, that's still only one part of it. I think all of us together need to push for that. And the one thing this pandemic has shown us is that we're in this together, all of us.
Yes.
So if it's not like, you can, one part of our community, you can leave it out, for some of the information, because if they get affected, it affects all of us. Yeah. So hopefully, I think the question now is on us. Now, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
Yeah.
And that continuing to hammer home on what broadband can do for a family, regardless of their background, in regards to education, in regards to income, and making perhaps figuring out ways to make more devices accessible to communities in need. I think those are a couple of things that have been talked about that could bear a lot of fruit.
Yes, and I think not only access to the internet, but access to technology.
Yes.
Yes, and ideal technology. I think it's hearing that kids have to do their homework on their parents' cell phone. My smartphone is great for instances where I need to do something quick, but in order to do that day-to-day work, I need my laptop. Otherwise, it's so stressing to work for a long time just on your phone. You know that. We could have done this interview over the phone, but we're doing it on the laptop because it's more convenient for us.
And more powerful.
Sometimes, yeah, and sometimes that convenience is not extended to all of us.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know, there are a lot of families that have to be faced with a choice. Do I pay my cell phone bill or my landline internet? And they look at it and say, well, the cell phone allows me to do a bunch of other things that maybe the internet doesn't. Therefore, I'm just going to make that choice. And that's a tough choice to make because it does have a real impact on the flexibility to do things technologically that one platform just is limited in doing.
Correct.
Yeah. Well, hey, Tara, I really want to thank you for your perspective here and your website. Tell us what your website is again. I want people to be able to reach out to you if they have additional questions.
Our website is holaiowa.com and also holaamericannews.com. We have two companies. One covers Illinois and Eastern Iowa,
Okay.
and Hola Iowa covers the whole state. And so hopefully, if anybody has more information that they would like to share with our audience, please reach out to me, and my contact information is on our website.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you for taking the time to record this for us for our rural broadband session, and you have a great day.
Thank you very much.
I really enjoyed that talk with Tar, and he brought up a lot of interesting perspectives that sometimes we think that different communities like the Latino community have different issues. A lot of times they have some of the same issues that other communities do. They just have a different perspective on those. So it's nice to be able to have him be able to participate and share some additional perspectives there. I want to move on to one thing I wanted to cover is we're going to kind of have an open discussion here toward the end. As you know, the Central Iowa Broadband Internet Survey has been up and running for four and a half weeks now, and we've got I believe 4,300 responses. So thank you to everybody who's taken it. We really do need more responses though, especially from some particular areas. But I took a little time to go through some of the comments that people are writing on the survey, in particular to rural broadband. So I wanted to put these up on the screen and it might spur some discussion. The one I really wanted to highlight is that bottom one. I believe maybe it was Tom that was mentioning the fact that sometimes it's an exorbitant cost to get a connection run that somebody needs, and it's maybe more than a person can afford. Here's someone who made the choice. We paid over $5,000 to have the internet run to our home in the country. That is a big economic decision that somebody made, but that just shows you exactly how important broadband is, at least to that family. So any comments or perspectives on any of the things you see on the screen here, panel?
Just quickly, that story you told about rural Bondurant, I think the households there were being told the cost to them would be $50,000 to $60,000 per household. So
Yeah.
$5,000 is a drop in the bucket.
Well, and we understand, and this is part of the quandary here, right? We understand that building a broadband network in a rural area is a pretty costly proposition, and providers don't always have the financial incentives they need to make it work, to make that project make sense financially. So, there are cases where the provider will say, the only way I can make this make sense is if you to provide some capital contribution. And that's especially a pointed issue where there might be, a mile of facilities that need to be built from one house to the other. So that certainly brings it to light.
But from a business perspective, what we also have is a lack of an ability to reach the market. That provider doesn't have the boots on the ground to actually try to say, let me go talk to 10 of your neighbors and see if they can help divide that cost out. So a lot of times we've found that a provider just simply doesn't know what the market is. And so part of the goals of this is for groups of people to self-identify and then give people the tools to say, well, this is what it might have to take, but we can self-identify a micro market and do it cheaply online. I mean, we have the tools here. We just need to have mapping tools to tie back to a provider who's actually looking at those. And so that's how we can empower people to actually try to solve a problem. A lot of times they tell every customer it'll cost $50,000, but it's just the first customer. They're
Right.
actually just, and that's pretty routine here in the broadband space.
One of the comments that I was showing on that screen that hits me always is, if they offer internet service as reliably as they provide electricity, that would be great. That's kind of the holy grail. And we certainly were able to do it with electricity in this country, unless you live in Texas, of course, and there's a cold snap. But we aren't quite there when it comes to internet service. Tom, I think you were going to say something. I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think talked a long time about some of the challenges we have. My younger brother, until very recently, worked for the state of South Dakota. And we were recently visiting about the population, relatively speaking, boom that they've had recently. Because in the western part of the states, and really across all of or most of South Dakota, they have wired the state or put fiber through. And they have had a lot of folks move in from the, bright lights, big city, to rural South Dakota, particularly in the Black Hills area, just because of the availability of connectivity. A lot of these information workers can work wherever they choose. And so they've chosen a lifestyle, they've chosen a setting, and the fiber allows you to come there. And so I think just to keep our eye on the prize here a little bit, I know that we would certainly be pleased to have some new neighbors out here. James gets new neighbors every week, it seems like, out in his area, but Winterset's growing too. So we're happy to have that, and we think that part of the solution, the democracy, the ability to work wherever you want to, is the fiber. We'll get you electricity and water. We just need you to have the connections.
Absolutely. Well, hey, as we wind things up here, trying to be respectful of our hour of time that we locked in, I want to just quickly review the other public forums that we will be holding online using Zoom, and invite anybody who's attending today to share and tell your friends about these, and also to participate if you can. At 4 this afternoon, we're going to have the challenges of learning from home. We've got a panel there of Joel Lundstrom from Des Moines Area Community College, Isaiah Knox with Urban Dreams, Kendra Alexander, Winterset Community School District. Wow, we're really kind of hammering on Madison County, aren't we, Tom? You can pay me back later.
We're happy for the attention, Curtis.
Well, I think you guys are just you said yes to invitation, so I appreciate that. And we had a recorded interview with Greg Ebeling at Pella Community School District. You might think, why couldn't somebody from Pella be on live today? But something about flowers going on down there. So that's this afternoon at 4. Come back and join us for that. We also have Getting Care from Anywhere, Telehealth in Central Iowa. That will be next Monday, the 10th at 2 p.m. And we've got a few guests there, and I'm working on a couple more for that one yet. Remote Work Challenges and Opportunities will be the final public forum. And we've got a great representation there from Iowa Economic Development Authority. We've got some entrepreneurs involved in that, and Marvin DeGier with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and sharing his perspectives on remote work in Central Iowa. We all know that's been something that has come to the top of everybody's mind here for the past few months and year, and it's only going to continue to grow. So we want to invite everybody to participate in that. The companies that are making this whole study available, I should say, not necessarily companies, entities here in Central Iowa. We want to thank them again. Those are some of the logos of the participants in the study and the survey. Any final closing thoughts from our panel here? Awesome. James, did you try to say something? You were muted. Yeah, you're muted there. So there you go.
Sorry about it.
That's okay.
I know this is primarily focused on, initial connectivity and haves not at the moment, but from a rural perspective, I think the thing that also needs to be kept in mind, so we don't create a second divide 5 years from now, is how do we keep pace in the rural setting with the upgrades? Because, you know, when 80 years ago, when we put electricity out, electricity is kind of stable. Yeah, it changes some, but the pace of change and the speeds that are needed today are going to be vastly different 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And, you know, we've had such a struggle getting connectivity, initial connectivity now. I can't imagine the struggle it's going to be to get an upgrade 5 years from now or 3 years from now, because of the density of population. So I don't know if that really fits into this or where that fits, but
Yeah.
you know, I think that's going to be a big issue.
Yeah, our
That is-
consulting team has talked about trying to build, you know, as a proof of concept for this project, an ongoing monitoring, because we've recognized internally that the definition of underserved is just going to keep changing and being relative. Having a tool or various tools at our disposal as a region is going to be important to maintain competitiveness for all areas and opportunities, and have more equal opportunities instead of more unequal.
Yeah,
If
yeah, go ahead, Brittany.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Okay. You know, if I might just chime into that, James, and when we're talking about the rural broadband experience, certainly recognize that there is underserved areas out there. But I think there is some hope in that, you know, I represent obviously those community-based providers, and they really are putting in, you know, significant investments for future-proof networks. And so I think a lot of times the narrative can be like, you know, oh, you know, what is the options for speed and reliability? But there are companies out there that are putting those investments in the ground. And I do think that there's a lot of opportunity. You know, they're making gig capable, you know, communities. And so it is possible for rural Iowa if, you know, everything comes down to money, right, and funding. So they've been putting in a lot of investment, and hopefully some of these tools that are coming out are going to just help them expand for their communities even more and get great service out to those folks.
And while we are, you know, in this study kind of remaining technologically neutral, you know, most industry experts believe that fiber optics is the most future-proof technology you could deploy. And it's important to note that there are probably more farms in rural areas with fiber to them today in Iowa than there are urban areas. Changing a little bit with some new players and providers doing upgrades. But again, like Brittany said, a lot of that's coming from those smaller community-based focused providers that are doing that. So, but that's a really good question, James, and it is a question that policymakers wrestle with, because if they're going to incentivize broadband being built out to areas that aren't served, you know, they want to make wise investments and not invest in technology that will already be outdated within a few years. So you've got your 40 meg now, James. You're going to need 108 meg in a couple of years. So how do we get that to you? That's a big challenge. So,
yep.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap things up here. I really want to thank everybody on the panel, as well as my my co-moderator Todd Kielkoff, Bill Menner. Thank you for joining us. Brittany Morales, James Bauer, Tom Lenners, and of course we had Tar Macias from the Ola America earlier, and also Brent Kelso from rural Warren County joining us. So thank you, everybody. And this recording will be posted on the Greater Des Moines Partnerships YouTube page. So if you missed part of it, come back and watch it again and send your friends over for these other sessions. Thank you.